I was wondering if you'd read Gar Alperovitz's book, America Beyond Capitalism, and if you have, what you thought of his ideas in the book.
Very important book, and the work that he's doing that's described there is extremely important. I mean, that's one of the things that can be done. It's very feasible. The book reviews work that Alperovitz mainly has been involved in for some years in trying to develop worker-owned enterprises, mostly in Ohio. It took off in Ohio for very interesting reasons. In, I guess it was 1977, as part of this change in the socioeconomic policy that I was discussing, the U.S. Steel Corporation decided to close down its operations in Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown is a steel town that was built by and around the steel industry. The working people, the community were extensively involved in steel production and everything that flows off of it, and manufacturing plant spawns all sorts of other things. So it was a steel town. U.S. Steel decided to sell it off, kill the town. Instead of just giving up, the workers in the community, what are called the stakeholders, offered to buy the plant and run it themselves. That could have been done. With enough public support, it could have happened. These were not public issues at the time. It did go to court. The union took the case to court to try to get the right to do it. They lost in the court, but they could have won, and it could have been carried forward. Well, so it was a kind of defeat, but like a lot of defeats, it wasn't the end of the story. It was the basis for moving on to something else. And what it spawned was a lot of much smaller scale efforts to establish worker-owned enterprises. A lot of it's called the Cleveland model, a lot of them around Cleveland and other parts of Ohio, which are not huge enterprises, but there's a lot of them. Alperovitz in his book reviews all of this. You can look at it for details. And these are, notice, worker-owned. That's short of worker-managed. That would be another step towards liberation. But it's real, and it's a way of reacting to the kind of collapse of the productive system for the 99% by just taking it over. Actually, if you take a look at standard texts in business economics, nothing radical. Standard texts in business economics point out that there's no economic principle or any other principle that says that corporations should be controlled by shareholders. Shareholders, incidentally, doesn't mean somebody whose pension fund has $2 of theirs as a share. Shareholders are very narrowly concentrated. Shareholdings like top 1% of the population, most of it. And that means big banks, interlocking directorates, and so on. So there's no economic principle that says they're the ones who should determine investment policy, like shipping production to Foxconn. There's no law of economics that says that should happen. It could just as well be done by stakeholders, by the workforce and the community, perfectly consistent with anything that anyone claims about economic theory. Well, there's no reason for, say, the Occupy movement to be less imaginative and ambitious than standard business texts. So yes, stakeholders could take over parts of the economy that are being dismantled, run them effectively, and direct them to different purposes. These are very feasible tasks. So, for example, one of the things that Obama's praised for by the kind of left liberal economists, Paul Krugman and others, is for having essentially nationalized the auto industry and reconstructed it. That's pretty much what happened. Well, once the auto industry was nationalized, which is essentially what happened, there were alternatives. One alternative was to reconstruct it and hand it back to essentially the original owners, not the same names, but same class, same banks, and so on. But that's what was done. Another possibility would have been to hand the auto industry over to the workforce and the communities, the stakeholders, and redirect it towards things that the country really needs. I mean, we badly need high-speed rail, for example. It's a kind of a shameful situation when you compare it, the U.S. with other countries, even much poorer countries. And it would be a tremendous economic benefit, and just a human benefit in all kinds of respects. It means I could have got here in 2 hours instead of wasting time at the airport, for example. Literally 2 hours. I happened to be in France a couple of months ago giving talks, and the last talk I gave was in southern France, and I had to get from Avignon, southern France, to the airport, de Gaulle Airport. And of course there's a train that goes directly to the airport. And it took 2 hours. It's the same distance as Washington to Boston. Here it takes, I don't know what, 8 hours or something. All of this these are human costs, they're economic costs, the things the country badly needs. The skilled workforce in the auto industry could easily could be reconverted to producing things like this and other things that people need. And it could be done under the ownership and management of the workforce and the communities. Well, that was an alternative. But getting back to Alperovitz, this is the kind of thing he's talking about. I don't remember if he talked about that particular case, but it's the kind of case that's coming up all the time. And these are very feasible things. They're not far out and utopian. And they can have a big effect on the society. And Alperovitz is one of the very few people who's really doing very good work on this. The book is certainly worth reading, thinking about what it describes, what options it suggests. But this comes up all the time, I should say. Like in Boston, I live in Boston. There's about a year ago, in a suburb of Boston, Taunton, a manufacturing town, there was a reasonably successful high technology small manufacturing plant that was producing equipment, high-tech equipment for aircraft. And they apparently were doing okay, but they weren't making enough profit for the managers in the multinational corporation who owned them. So the corporation wanted to just dismantle it. The union, United Electrical Workers, wanted to buy the operation and just run it themselves. Well, the corporation wouldn't agree. I suspect that they wouldn't agree mostly on class grounds. It's kind of not a good idea to let people own and manage their own workplaces and get the wrong idea. Anyhow, whatever the reason, it didn't work. But if, say, the Occupy movement had been around, and if it had been active and energetic enough, and had reached out sufficiently, that's the kind of thing it could have participated in and supported and maybe gotten it over the edge. Well, that'd be important in maintaining, say, manufacturing in Massachusetts. And that kind of thing goes on all the time. These are options that are all over the place.